Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Afghanistan's High Council for National Reconciliation Chief Abdullah says representatives of the Taliban and the Afghan government will discuss ways to implement a permanent ceasefire as a priority when they meet again on Sunday. This comes as the warring sides met the first time in Doha following a ceremony to launch the long-awaited peace talks. Earlier, the Taliban said they have released 22 Afghan soldiers in the southern Helmand province as a goodwill gesture. The Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen says it has attacked Houthi positions in the capital, Sana'a. Saudi state media said fighter jets targeted barracks and military sites of the rebels. Earlier, it said the coalition downed 4 explosive-laden Houthi drones at the Al-Delmi airbase north of Sana'a. The United States has expressed deep concern over Turkey's actions, calling for a diplomatic solution to the Eastern Mediterranean crisis. During a visit to Cyprus, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said countries in the region should look forward towards negotiations to resolve the bilateral issues. The top U.S. diplomat said Nicosia has the right to exploit the natural resources in its territorial seas and its exclusive economic zone. News in detail coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Afghanistan's High Council for National Reconciliation Chief Abdullah says the Taliban and Kabul's negotiators will discuss ways to implement a permanent ceasefire as a priority when they meet today. In an interview, Abdullah said representatives will decide on priority issues, starting with those on which it is easiest to find common ground. He also emphasized the government team will focus on protecting women's rights. Earlier, the Taliban said they have released 22 Afghan soldiers in the southern Helmand province as a goodwill gesture. In a statement, the group's spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said the Taliban seek to accelerate the process of intra-Afghan negotiations. Mujahid said all sides must take steps to create an atmosphere of trust so that the process can reach its desired conclusion. This comes as the warring sides met for the first time in Doha following a ceremony to launch the long-awaited peace talks. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Pakistan's Special Representative for Afghanistan, Mohammad Sadiq, has met with all stakeholders at the intra-Afghan negotiations in Doha. Sadiq says he had significantly useful discussions with the negotiators. Mohammad Sadiq met Chairman of Afghanistan's High Council for National Reconciliation, Abdullah. He also called on Kabul's chief negotiator to intra-Afghan negotiations, Mohammad Masoom Stanikzai. The Prime Minister's representative also held a discussion with Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar and other members of the Taliban Political Commission. Taliban spokesperson Muhammad Naeem said the two sides discussed relevant issues in details. Moving on, Iran says the continued presence of foreign forces in Afghanistan is the main reasons behind the conflict in the country. In a statement, Iranian Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the Afghanistan conflict has no military solution and dialogue is the only way to find a settlement. The statement said peace and stability in Afghanistan requires the responsible withdrawal of all foreign forces. It said Iran hopes that the Afghan government and the Taliban will be able to preserve the democratic and constitutional values of the country. It added that Iran welcomes the intra-Afghan talks in Doha and hopes that they will lead to a permanent stability in Afghanistan and in the region. Now, the Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen says it has attacked Houthi positions in the capital, Sana'a. Saudi state media said fighter jets targeted barracks and military sites of the rebels. The state media said the coalition downed 4 explosive-laden Houthi drones at the Al-Delmi airbase north of Sana'a. A day earlier, the coalition launched 9 strikes on a military engineering camp and headquarters for Houthis. The number of such incidents has spiked after Saudi forces shot down multiple Houthi drones aiming at Riyadh last week. Meanwhile, Mali's new military leaders have agreed to establishing an 18-month transition government until an election can take place. The announcement comes after 3 days of talks between military, political leaders and civil society groups. Spokesperson Musa Kamara said the interim government will either be led by a military officer or a civilian. While military junta head Colonel Assimi Goita said they are committed to implementing all resolutions of the charter, including general elections. The opposition coalition has strongly rejected the idea of a military officer leading the transitionary period. Now, the United States says Libya's renegade commander Khalifa Haftar has committed to ending a months-long blockade of oil facilities. Libya's oil production has plunged by around 3/4 since Haftar launched a blockade. In a statement, the U.S. Embassy in Libya said Haftar's forces had convened their commitment to allowing the full reopening of the energy sector. Last week, the National Oil Corporation said total losses due to the blockade in the past 230 control economic and political crisis. Soldiers fired rubber bullets at the demonstrators and live rounds in the air to disperse hundreds of protesters. Supporters of President are called for a counter-protest at the same location, adding to the tension. The demonstrations have intensified after the massive explosion shattered Beirut, killing 200 people. Now, in Israel, thousands of people have staged a protest outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem for the 12th consecutive week. They are calling for Netanyahu's resignation over allegations of corruption and his mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic. Police have made a few arrests, though protesters have been peaceful.
I think it's time for Bibi to go away and leave us alone, and not alone, I mean without him, and let him figure out what to do with all these accusations he's got against him.
Well, the Prime Minister was indicted on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust in November last year. Now, moving on, the U.S. says it will continue to support the Sudanese people as flash floods continue to ravage the country. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he called Sudan's Premier Abdallah Hamdok to offer condolences for those who died in the floods. Pompeo said the two sides discussed U.S. assistance for flood response. Over 100 people have died in floods that swamped more than 100,000 houses. Since July, 500 people had been injured due to flooding. On Thursday, authorities declared an economic emergency following a dramatic plunge in the value of the national currency. Moving to India, where the number of coronavirus cases has topped 4.7 million, with over 94,000 infections overnight. The country registered 1,114 deaths in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to over 78,500. While France has reported a record high number of single-day COVID-19 cases, as more than 10,500 people tested positive. Globally, the virus has claimed over 920,000 lives and infected more than 28.7 million people so far. Details in this report.
Second wave of COVID-19 has started eroding all progress made by European countries in containing the virus in major countries like France, UK, Germany, Spain and Italy. In the US, the virus continues its aggressive spread in most of the states as President Donald Trump opposes restrictions. Down south, Latin American states are being devastated by the disease, where Brazil, Mexico and Colombia top the list.
Muchas familias Many families have lost loved ones. We have seen the economic and social devastation across the planet and also in our own territory. We had never thought about living through a situation like this, but we have seen in these months that as a country we have resilience, motivation, and enthusiasm to move forward.
In a positive development, AstraZeneca has resumed British clinical trials of its COVID-19 vaccine after getting a green light from the safety watchdogs. Meanwhile, Australia has decided to extend restrictions on its COVID-19 hotspot state of Victoria.
Today, I can announce that we have extended the state of emergency and the state of disaster for a further 4 weeks. That underpins all the different rules. It underpins taking those safe and steady steps.
Decide today if it would extend stricter antivirus curbs in the Greater Seoul area as number of infections drop. But in Wuhan, the place where it all started, domestic air travel has returned to pre-pandemic levels with 500 domestic flights.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 6 people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the country's death toll has reached 6,379. The ministry said 526 people tested positive for the virus overnight. It said there are 5,673 active infections, while the total confirmed cases have crossed 301,000. The ministry said over 289,000 people have recovered so far. Earlier, Federal Minister for Planning and Development Asad Umar said Pakistan will begin phase 3 trial of a Chinese vaccine in 10 days. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. The United States has expressed deep concern over Turkey's actions, calling for a diplomatic solution to the Eastern Mediterranean crisis. During a visit to Cyprus, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said countries in the region should look towards negotiations to resolving the bilateral issues. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced plans to further security cooperation between Washington and Nicosia. Pompeo said the disagreements over regional security and maritime energy resources should be peacefully resolved. The top U.S. diplomat said Nicosia has the right to exploit the natural resources in its territorial seas and its exclusive economic zone.
We remain deeply concerned by Turkey's ongoing operations surveying for natural resources in areas over which Greece and Cyprus assert jurisdiction in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Republic of Cyprus has the right to exploit its natural resources, including the right to hydrocarbons found in its territorial sea and its exclusive economic zone. We also believe that the resources of Cyprus should be shared equitably among the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriot community.
Meanwhile, Greece has ramped up its defense spending amid tensions with neighboring Turkey over energy resources in the Eastern Mediterranean. In an address, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said Athens will strengthen its armed forces after years of de-investment. Mitsotakis said it is time to balance the country's economic and security objectives. He said Greece will purchase 18 Rafale fighter jets, 4 new frigates and new weapons, including torpedoes and missiles. The armed forces are also set to hire 15,000 personnel over the next 5 years. Mitsotakis said the Greeks are ready to pay the price to keep their place on the world map. Now, in Belarus, police have detained dozens of protesters in Minsk who are demanding the release of jailed opposition leader Maria Kolesnikova. She has emerged as a key opposition figure after others were either jailed or forced out of the country. Protesters say the August 9th election was rigged to hand Alexander Lukashenko a landslide victory. At least 5,000 protesters, many of them women, gathered in the central Minsk chanting "Go away" in reference to Lukashenko. Last week, Kolesnikova was driven to the Ukrainian border after being seen snatched off the streets of Minsk and into a van by masked men. She is now detained in Minsk and faces a potentially long prison term over accusations of trying to seize power illegally. Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga says he will guard the economy after it got a blow from the pandemic. He made the remarks at a debate ahead of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party leadership election on Monday. Suga said he will use all means, including an additional economic package, to keep businesses going. He said there are complex issues between China, South Korea and other neighboring countries. The Cabinet Secretary said Tokyo needs to strategically form ties with these countries and communicate regularly. While rival candidate Shigeru Ishiba said the Bank of Japan should not make any immediate changes to its ultra-easy monetary policy. Suga is widely expected to become the Prime Minister next week after he secured the support of 5 major factions of the ruling party. In the Chinese city of Tianjin, a group of senior athletes have become local celebrities for their unique gymnastic skills. More about the acrobats in this report.
Older but limber, a group of senior gymnastic enthusiasts are showing their skills in China's Tianjin, becoming celebrities among locals. They hold training sessions in a park and even have a fan club of their own. This is the life Tong Yugin always dreams of, to become a gymnastics star. He finally realized his dream in his 70s and has even become the leader of a team of elderly athletes sharing the same ambition.
We organized Lau and Tong gymnastics team 10 years ago. We felt very boring after retirement and did not know what to do. And so we started practicing gymnastics.
The average age of the team is 60, with some senior members in their 80s. They outdo most young athletes by the stunning performances they put on. Combining gymnastics with Chinese acrobatics, they also created some unique performances which takes both courage and years of practice.
Don't be bothered by the old age. The elders should have their own ways to take pleasure. You should believe you are still young. That's what I do.
The gymnastics team have a fan club of around 30 members, mostly ladies of their age, who often come to watch their skills. The gymnastics team now has over 300 members whose life after retirement seems to be anything but boring.
With that, we come to the end of the bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.